Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see everyone this morning. My name is Marsha Gordon. I'm the President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. And yes, we are here virtually for our Tompkins Mahopac Bank Power Breakfast. So everything at the BCW is continuing as best as we can. We've been thrilled with the participation we've received virtually from so many members. I believe we have about 170 people joining us today on Zoom Live, and this will be on Facebook Live and in our Business Resource Center afterwards. We are so pleased to have so many members participate and to be providing the most up-to-date information for the Westchester business community in the region. It's my pleasure to introduce Dave Demilia, the Senior Vice President of Tompkins Mahopac Bank, who continues to be and has been so supportive to businesses and to the Business Council of Westchester. So Dave. Welcome.
Thank you, Marsha. Thank you very much. I appreciate you arranging this today. And thank you to the entire BCW for all that you've been doing. You've been a great source of consistent and reliable information. I look forward to your email blasts daily because they've really been a great source of information. So thank you.
Thank you.
I did want to talk about some of the great work that we're doing here at the bank. Yet again, some in our industry have given all of us a little bit of a black eye here. And I did want to highlight, I think everybody understands the difference between a community bank and some of the larger banks, but I did want to highlight some of the things that we are doing right now during the pandemic. First of all, our people are out in the branches. We're operating in a different capacity, but our folks are out there dealing with customers every day and trying to make sure that all of their needs are met. It's scary times for our people that are out there, particularly at the beginning. We're learning more every day and finding ways to keep our folks safe, but they are out there and we thank them tremendously for what they're doing. The second thing that I wanted to bring up, and I'll be pretty quick, Marsha, is our deferment program. We, before the governor announced his suggestion to the banks to extend mortgage deferments for residential customers for 90 days, before that happened, we put out to all of our customers, commercial, small business customers, everybody, that they could, without any questions asked, request a 60-day deferment, which we later changed to 90 to coincide with what the governor suggested. But that was made available to all of our customers. A great many took advantage of it, and in fact, we're looking to even extend some of them out even further. To try to make it a little easier so that our small businesses that their doors are closed are able to continue working and not at least have to worry about our payments. And then finally, just quickly on the PPP program, I think it's been highly publicized. I won't go into all the twists and turns along the way and how we're still waiting for some guidance on the forgiveness, but I did want to highlight that we processed throughout our company thousands. I'm not able at this point to give you all the details, but thousands of applications. We met the needs of virtually all of our customers. We are still open with our PPPs right now, and we're processing the last couple of dozen, but we've gotten everybody through. We were open before the larger banks the very first day that the program was available. We were accepting applications, and our team, our processors, worked through the night in shifts to make sure that this got done, because the first round of funds were expected to go in just a few days. So we had teams of folks ranging from the teller line all the way through to senior vice presidents keying in these applications in the middle of the night to get this stuff done. Sundays, weekends, evenings, just around the clock, and I'm really proud of everything that we've done. So I'm sorry, Marsha, that I've taken a little bit more time than I ordinarily would, but I'm just so proud of our team that I wanted to share it with everyone. So thank you.
Thank you, David, and to Tompkins Mahopac Bank. I want to say one thing that I think the business community has learned is how important it is to have bankers and advisors with whom you have a relationship. And I know at Tompkins Mahopac Bank, that's what you're about. And I think your customers who went through this process, which was a very difficult process, really learned that. So thank you so much for everything your team does. So the topic of today's panel breakfast is the reemergence and reimagination of business, preparing for safety, success, and sustainability. I just love to say that word reemergence because, and we've been saying it several times this week with our town hall meeting yesterday and our task force, because we are going to reemerge, and we want to all reemerge safely and with health, most important. And our speakers today are here to provide the listeners with great advice. And we do encourage you to put questions in the question and answer and in the chat room. We will try to get to them. I'm just going to introduce them. I'm just going to say their names, ask them quickly to introduce themselves, and then get into the meat of it. So Marjorie Ciucci, I said it wrong, Ciucci. So Marjorie Ciucci, Senior Employment Benefits Consultant of Lowly Insurance. Chris Gately, Director of Human Resources, Meyer Markey and Justic. Joe Saccomano, Attorney at Law, Jackson Lewis, and Andrew Weisz, Executive Vice President at RPW Group. I think I just introduced you, so rather than do that, I'm going to dive into the questions, and you can say a few words about your company. And so let's start. So Marge, I'm going to start with you. As I start to bring employees, so Marge is an expert in employee benefits, and we want to know, as we start to bring employees back who were laid off due to COVID-19 back to work, do they have a waiting period to rejoin their benefit plans?
So this is really thank you, Marsha. This is really a unique time where all the rules have seemed to be thrown out the window and we've just made up new ones. So normally, if you furloughed your employees and kept them on benefits while they've been not at work, then you have nothing to do when you bring your employees back. However, if you've laid off employees and you're now bringing them back, all of the fully insured companies are waiving their rehire period, which means if you bring somebody back on June 1st, they can be effective for benefits on June 1st. So depending on whether you're day of the month or the first of the month following, you can bring your employees back. If you're a self-insured plan, then you should really look, the rules can apply, but you should make sure that you've made modifications to your documents saying that you're waiving the rehire period at this time.
That's great. And by the way, I've encouraged the other panelists, if they have anything to add or have a conversation, if we were sitting in front of everyone with a table and a drape and 10 cards, that's what it would be like. So we have to pretend now. And Marge, is there a compliance timeframe that has been extended due to the COVID-19?
Yes, so they've come out with quite a few extensions to the timeframes, and how they're working it is that things like HIPAA, special enrollments, COBRA continuation, filing for your benefit claims and appeals, notices under ERISA, they all have time periods of 30 or 60 days. During this period, what they've done is said, until the national emergency period is declared over. So let's say the national emergency period is declared over April 30th, which we know it wasn't, but I'm just using it as an example. You have 60 days for an outbreak period, then those timeframes kick back in. So it's really extending it out. So far, we're already past April 30th. So if it's May 30th, you have to add 2 months onto that, and then all of the normal timeframes pick up again.
And can you tell me more about the special open enrollment for medical plans due to the COVID-19 outbreak? What does that mean?
So a special open enrollment is like, for instance, if I have a baby or I move, all of those kind of life events that happen. Usually you have 30 days in which to put an employee or a child on the plan or make changes to your plan from the date of this life event. Due to the extensions now, so I'll use an example, I think that's probably easier. If Mary had a baby on March 30th, and she wants to now, she didn't elect coverage with her employer beforehand, so now wants to join it. In the normal world, she would have had until April 1st to put her, until April 30th to put her and the child on the plan. Now, because of this outbreak, she has until, let's say the date was April 30th, 60 days from there makes it now June 29th. She has until June, and then she has 30 days from there. So she really has until July 29th to elect to put her and the child on the plan.
Got it. That's
So
great.
they just really, yeah.
That's a great example. That's a great example. And there have also been recent changes to COBRA timeframes. What does that mean?
This is the scariest one of all of them, I really think, because what it's done is taken all of the timeframes that are within COBRA and extended them out by this national emergency period plus 60 days. So it's for the notification if a qualified employee wants to elect COBRA, they usually have 60 days in which to make the election, and then an additional 45 days in which to pay. That's now been moved out to this national emergency period. So again, in an example, if somebody's gone to April 30th, if the national emergency period was over April 30th, they now have until August 28th, July 29th to elect COBRA, and then an additional 45 days to pay for it. And it goes all the way back to their term period of March 30th or April 1st. That's the first one. Then it's for people who pay. So if you have somebody on COBRA, they don't have to make payments now until after this national enrollment period is over, 60 days, and then they get their 30-day grace period. So somebody from, technically speaking, if I keep my examples stable and say April 30th was the day the national emergency period was over, employees have until July 29th to make payments for March, April, May, and June.
Interesting. Well, it's certainly a complicated issue for many of us. And Marge, I'm so glad that you and Lawley Insurance are there to help. And we are going to take questions afterwards. We're going to go through the whole panel and take questions. And we certainly encourage anyone who's listening to reach out to all of our experts. So our next speaker is Chris Gately, who's Director of Human Resources for Meyer Markey and Justick. And Chris, what role can HR or the HR function play in responding to the effects of pandemic on employees in the organization?
Thanks, Marsha. Appreciate it. I think an HR professional can help to create the reimagined workplace that will help employees
create the reimagined workplace. That's a good one.
That will make employees feel safe, comfortable, and productive. And I think the best way to do that is by listening, learning, and leading. I think in terms of listening, I think the most important thing is listening to the employees, maybe conducting a focus group or a survey of employees and what their concerns are right now, listening to the managers and what their needs are and concerns are. And I think also learning in terms of all the different things that are out there in government agencies and sites, getting out of our comfort zone and learning new things. At the same time, knowing we don't have all the answers, but it seems like right now we've had to become a infectious disease expert by having to learn all these new things that we never even thought we would have imagined before. I think we have to come up with new ways of doing things that we otherwise probably didn't in the past, and be creative in making sure that we can reassure employees. Learn what other companies are doing and what are the best practices.
And I know in your role at Meyer Markey and Justick, you've really been working with your own company to get your employees back safely and helping others as well. So thank you. What are the most important things that we should all consider as we begin to plan to recall employees?
As you said before, number one is safety, right? In terms of making sure the employees feel confident and comfortable and they feel reassured that the workplace is safe. So one idea is that some companies may consider taking a video of the workplace actually being cleaned and disinfected, because we're all New Yorkers and seeing is believing. We might be skeptical and you could tell us that we're doing that, but unless I actually see it. Both the CDC and OSHA has a lot of great resources, but all that information can be very overwhelming. And we have to take all of those guidelines and apply it to my organization and meticulously go through those guidelines and safeguards and see how it applies to my organization. Some of the questions are, will employees wear masks? Will the organization provide the mask? Will employees have to wear the mask the whole day? Are we going to have enough cleaning and personal protective equipment, supplies, masks, the disinfectant wipes, the sprays, the signage? The worst, if you can imagine, the worst situation would be an employee realizing that we don't have enough supplies, even after we've been recalled. So that would certainly be we want to be proactive and be in advance of that. Another big issue that's getting attention is the screening of employees in terms of taking the COVID tests and temperature screening. And I'm sure something that Joe will touch upon maybe later, but there's a lot of technology available now, contactless temperatures, kiosks, that is being explored. So those are some of the things that are, important things to consider. All of those things that you have to plan in advance of the reopening. Are we going to do it in phases? What safety rules are we going to put into place? All of those, every little detail from the time the employee comes into the workplace to the time they leave has to be examined, I think.
Great, Chris. And I know the next question, I'm not sure if you're doing or Joe is doing, so I would invite you both to chime in here. About policies. What policies should employer be reviewing or considering as business resumes?
Sure, that's it. I think this is an area where practical insight will serve us well. Maybe the company was previously strict about using sick time and their attendance policies were very stringent. Now companies are going to really rethink that and be much more flexible. In the example of telework, maybe previously a company used to think of it only as, when a snow day occurred, right? But now it's a common practice, and maybe the company didn't even have a telework policy, right? So with the pandemic, we have to think of things a lot differently than we did before. I use the example that's going on right now in the supermarket, right? With one-way aisles. If you had told somebody 2 years ago that would have been something we'd be doing, you probably would have been ridiculed. So I think it's important that today we look at practices and policies that we developed a year ago and really rethink that and change it and be adaptive to the current environment. And those include safety protocols, teleworking, paid time off, leaves. And I think, Joe, I'll leave it to Joe to talk a little bit more some of those items.
So Joe, do you want to jump in here or should we wait until your turn?
I'll pick it up to when I go.
Okay, great, wonderful. How does an employer, Chris, implement an approach to have employees return to work?
I think most organizations are really coming up with a very comprehensive plan now and developing a committee of people that will have input from management, employees, and have a very really detailed return to work plan that has the safeguards, and we're looking at the physical workplace itself and the new rules and protocols, and then put it in writing, making sure it's very detailed and how it will be communicated to employees. I use the example of the video. It could be pictures of the workplace with the new signage to give employees a preview of what their workplace is going to be like so that they feel reassured and confident that the organization has done everything possible to feel comfortable, safe, and they can be productive. Some organizations are developing a training plan on the new protocols, and we have to be prepared. Another important thing is if employees are reluctant to return because they still feel uncomfortable. And that would be something that we have to think through as we get to that point.
Absolutely. And finally, how does an employer decide which employees are coming back first?
That's a good part of the question, I think, is making a very valid business objective reasons for each person. Each organization is different based upon, number one, the mission of the organization, the type of organization, the types of products and services they provide. I think is important to look at. The person's job and their job function related to the mission of the organization, and how critical each job is to the organization, and whether or not those services and products can be provided on site. I guess an example is a receptionist, right? So before, now they can't really, probably had difficulty doing their job, obviously teleworking, but now that the workplace is open, now they can come on site. Example, healthcare, right? A dentist, an HVAC technician, all of these childcare provider, all of these now would be essential if New York State lifts the pause order for that particular industry. But I think the most important thing is having a very clear business objectives for each person, each job, and not do it on a person-by-person basis.
Wow, Chris, that's really, really terrific information. Thank you. And so, Joe, I guess it's a great segue into employment law. Joe Saccomano is with Jackson Lewis, the leading employment law firm. So thank you, Joe. So, Joe, what are some of the key legal issues employers have been facing when trying to reduce staff choices? It's a tough one.
Yes. Well, hello, everybody. So with regard to the key issues that the employers are looking at, and I don't think I'm on the screen, but that's okay.
You are. You're good.
You really need to remember that simply because we are in a pandemic situation, that you have to follow the laws and the rules that exist. So, for example, employers still have obligations under the WARN Act to give employees notice in certain situations that they will be laid off. Employers still have obligations to make sure that they are making decisions based on business-related reasons. Unfortunately, what we've seen is that in some situations, this is not so clear-cut because employers, rightfully so, are trying to maintain staff the staff that they think they will need to get through this crisis situation. That might mean that considerations such as seniority are not the best considerations to use. So these are very important analysis that must be done, because what we're starting to see now in the courts is that lawsuits are starting to be filed by former employees that are claiming that they were put on layoff lists for impermissible reasons, such as age, disability, race, sex, and the classic, discrimination category. So when you're downsizing, the main thing to remember is this: the rules are the same, the considerations are the same. So it has to be done carefully, and carefully considering not only the staff that you need, but being able to document and prove why you need that staff.
So let's go back to that employment policy question. What are the important employment policy decisions employers must make as we enter this time period during which some employees will continue to work remotely?
And I'm so glad that Chris touched on the policy, because I think that's so important. You know, one of the things, and since our firm is a national firm, we are counseling employers that are already in states that are far ahead of New York in terms of opening up. So we're seeing this roll out, okay? So most of us expect that New York will be somewhat of a hybrid for the coming months to come. We will continue to have staff working remotely whenever possible, and we'll probably have a hybrid situation, meaning we will have some people working in the office and some people working at home. Number one, you need to take out your employee handbook and read it and make sure that it's still relevant to the emerging workplace. It may not be relevant anymore. First of all, you may not have looked at it in a long time. And second of all, the rules have changed. Do you have policies that address working from home? Do you have policies? Are you prepared to record time of people not in the workplace? So you need to look at those policies. That's number one. Number two, you need to remember that you still have training obligations in the states that you operate. So we still have our obligations to do sexual harassment training, for example. How are we going to get that done? We need to start thinking about that. Do we have how are we going to do that? And lastly, and very importantly, this concept of bringing back people into the workplace. You're probably going to be in a hybrid situation, okay? So each time you make a decision as to who you're going to require to work from home and who you're going to require to work in the office and who you're going to allow to work from home, you are making different choices amongst employees. that opens you up to a legal challenge. Okay, are you going to allow an employee, say for an example, to stay home because they have a medical condition, but require another employee to come in that doesn't have a medical condition, but is telling you that they are fearful or they have a family member that has a medical condition. So these are the type of legal issues that are going to have to be addressed as you have a policy that's going to have to deal with both working from home and working in the office.
And Joe, how should employers adjust employment agreements for the future to guard against the ramifications of, God forbid, another outbreak of COVID-19?
Okay, that's a great question. You know, most of us think of employment at will. So we always tend to think of employees in the workplace that don't have a contract and they're subject to our policies. But there's two other groups of employees out there we have to be very mindful of. Number one, it's our employees that are part of collective bargaining, that we have union contracts for. We cannot forget that group. We have to be mindful to the fact that in many obligations in many situations, we have an obligation right now to be communicating with the union representation about what the new workplace is going to look like. Secondly, we have, for example, that would be hospitals, nursing homes, places with a lot of employees in union. Those dialogues need to begin now. Secondly, you have employees that have employment contracts or commission agreements or agreements that cover how they will be compensated. You need to review those agreements to make sure that they address what happens to pay in a pandemic situation, okay? Because some of them right now don't. So employers are doing the best they can in an imperfect world to deal with how are you going to deal with this employment agreement. But going forward, what we've seen is that employment agreements need to address what happens if a person cannot work or cannot work at full capacity. Are you still going to pay them the full amount? Are you still, how are you going to change the way that their commissions are calculated? These are things that need to be reviewed, considering the fact that most experts are predicting that we will at some point in the fall have another potential interruption of the workplace. So we need to look at those now. We need to look at our collective bargaining agreements for our union folks, and we need to look at our employment contracts for our contract employees. Two different things.
Very, very, very key, very key. By the way, please put questions and answers in the question and answer box or the chat room. And Joe, finally, what kind of legal claims are already being filed? What are you seeing at Jackson Lewis relating to actions employers have taken during the past 2 months?
Okay. Well, of course, right, in any situation, the lawyers are in there first. I mean, plaintiffs' lawyers are people too, and they need to make a living, so they're out there looking for clients. And number one thing I've already seen filed is people claiming that they were selected for layoff, not because of COVID-19 or a business reason, but because of some other reason, because of whether it be disability or age or some other protected reason. Number two thing we're seeing a lot of, and this covers both employers and businesses that are places of public accommodation, businesses that welcome the public in, such as banks. People are already filing lawsuits under Title III of the ADA, claiming that the disabled community is being left behind or excluded in the new emerging workplace, in the new emerging place of public accommodation. So for businesses that are considering access of public to their place of business soon, they have to think about access of individuals in the disabled in the disabled community. And then lastly, what we have not seen, but we fully expect, we expect an explosion of workers' compensation lawsuits coming. And that's why I think some of the things that Chris pointed out are really so important in terms of protecting your workforce. And one thing I would just add on to what he said, I thought his points were excellent. Don't do things that you are not prepared to do. If the governor opened up Westchester on June 1st. Let's hope completely. If you're not ready to have your workforce back, okay, don't bring your workforce back until you're ready. There are still ramifications. Okay, so in my eyes, we probably have the next 2 weeks to get everything together. However, there's no magical date to this that you have to bring people back. That's your choice. So make sure you're ready. And lastly, just to touch on something that Chris said, and I think this is really important, talking to your people. Management, business owners always want to be the source of honest information for their employees.
Oops. Thank you.
Builds productivity. And I do think you're going to see an explosion in union organizing over the rest of the year. And management wants to be the source of truthful information at all times.
Joe, thank you. That's really, really important information. We appreciate it. So Andrew Weisz, we at the Business Council of Westchester can't wait to walk back into our beautiful office at 800 Westchester Avenue, one of RPW Group's buildings. And we've seen the great care you've taken in communicating to your tenants. We appreciate that. So can you talk about what actions the RPW Group is taking to prepare your buildings for reoccupancy?
Yes, Marsha, thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at the building as well. Good morning. I just want to take a quick minute to thank all these essential workers that have gone above and beyond the call during this incredibly difficult time. And more particularly for RPW, all of our buildings have remained open and fully operational. And that's thanks to building staff, porters, engineers, cleaning staff, security guards that have all shown up to work. So we're really appreciative of that. Over the past 3 weeks or so, we've been laser focused on the idea of reopening the workplace. We're in touch with all the major real estate brokerage firms and tracking in particular what's been going on in Asia. I think first and most important is communication. Tenants need to know what's happening at the buildings, what building owners are planning to do. So we at RPW have been doing bi-weekly tenant memos, letting them know what's happening, what the plans are, what we know. And just this week, we circulated a fairly extensive reopening plan. So we think key is to keep tenants informed. Business owners need to know what's happening so that they can relay that information to their employees. More specifically within the buildings, we are unveiling a signage program. So we're going to, quite simply, we're going to have signage everywhere. At elevator buttons, stairwell doors, lobby entrances, bathroom doors, basically telling people to wear masks, wash your hands, follow all the protocols that the CDC and the government's putting out. We want to try and make really the safest work environment we can. Another important thing is the sanitization of the workplace. So we've actually increased cleaning staff at all the buildings. So we're sanitizing multiple times a day, all the high touch points, bathrooms, elevator buttons, etc. And as we start to talk about reopening the buildings, we're also going to be doing a sanitization of all the HVAC systems, fans, replacing with new filters, etc. So, in addition to that, we are going to be offering temperature checks in the lobby of the buildings for folks that would like to have their temperature check. Our security staff has been trained and has thermometers for those employees of the buildings that would like it taken. We will be offering that. And at the end of the day, now more than ever, the landlord-tenant relationship is crucial. Everyone has to work together to make this work. There's just no other way to do it. So we're looking forward to continuing to partner with our tenants and really trying to work together to create the safest sort of workplace and protocols that we can.
So, it's interesting from the beginning of this webinar to now and continuing forward, the word relationship, whether it's with your landlord, whether it's a banker, your insurance person, your HR person, your employee, it's so important. So in this time when we're physically not seeing each other, those relationships are even more important. So thank you, Andrew. So what are the new offices going to look like post-COVID? What is it? How do you expect the office configuration to change?
Yeah, look, it's been very interesting to hear different folks' thoughts on this. I think out of the gate, we're going to see a number of things. One is as we do start to go back, we're going to see staggered hours. So folks either will come. Might have a team come in, say from 8 to noon, and another team from 1 to 5 or 1 to 6, or stagger the workday. So maybe you have Team A come in Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Team B come in Tuesday, Thursday, and there's no crossover between those two teams. In addition, we're hearing, de-densification. The trend over the past couple of years was to jam bodies into space, trading desk style, elbow to elbow. That's going to be tough to handle under these circumstances. So we're hearing a lot about people using conference rooms, huddle rooms, putting desks in those spaces to space people out, and then finding other ways like the staggered work hours where, maybe you have every other person in the office so that you can create the 6 foot sort of distancing that you need. And then certainly you're hearing, folks potentially, longer term, maybe taking more space to allow for sort of the more social distancing to occur in the office. And then look, there's also an element of work from home that's been going on that, there could be a potential for that to grow a little bit. We'll have to wait and see.
So that's interesting because we're starting to talk about trends, right? And let's face it, we're in Westchester County, we're an economic development and business development organization. So how do you, Andrew, you're an expert, how do you envision leasing activity to be impacted in Westchester?
Yeah, so I mean, we're living through it right now in real time. And what I mean by that is we own over 2 million square feet in Westchester County, 8 buildings in the county, all office buildings. And we're receiving a flurry of inquiries from New York City-based companies, all industries, that are reaching out inquiring about space. And the thought process being that New York City has a difficult task ahead of them in terms of how to get to work. Unless you can walk to work, you're either getting on Metro North or Long Island Railroad, you're getting on the subway. And then once you get to your building and you're in the lobby, how do you get to your 30th floor office? All situations that present tight quarters and a difficult task to figure out. Westchester offers a lot of benefits with respect to COVID. Most folks, many people drive to work so they can control their transportational environment. And all our buildings are no more than 6 or 7 stories max. So you can park. Many people are going to take the stairwells. We're activating all the stairwells. So you don't have to necessarily take an elevator and then get to your space and try to control that environment. So we think there's going to be quite a bit of office leasing activity in Westchester for folks that maybe had offices in New York City and want to diversify the staff and give them another opportunity somewhere a little less dense to work out of.
So Andrew, we at the Business Council of Westchester certainly look forward to working with you and the other people in the real estate community to give those New York City employers another option. So thanks.
Yeah, I think that's going to be key going forward.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, you've made us feel very comfortable going back to work when we're all ready and when the governor says we can at our office at 800 Westchester. So I'm going to go to the question and answer here because we have several. So Marjorie, I think this one is probably for you. If someone has a covered family member that turns 26 during the COVID-19 outbreak, are there any extensions to allow that family member to stay on their plan past their 26th birthday for medical and dental?
That's a great question. So they have not specifically spoken about the age 26 extending those timeframes, but I would suggest that if you have that situation, you call your insurance carrier because different insurance carriers handle these rules differently, and they may put in an extension, even though it's not required. They may put in an extension during this period. So While there's been nothing official that we've seen, I would suggest you talk to your carrier because they may have made that tweak in their policy. And if you can take advantage of it, why not?
Great, thank you. Very, very informative. This is for everyone. Does anyone know if there'll be safety mandates in place, or will it be left to the discretion of the business owner?
I expect New York State will come out with very detailed guidance coming soon, right? I believe so.
Mhm.
Connecticut has issued some very detailed guidance talking about density being mandated at 50% or less of the occupancy or capacity of the building. So I would imagine New York would mirror those similar guidelines.
Great, thank you. Yes, and for those of you, you should all be receiving our daily updates. Every day we send out at the Business Council of Westchester the new regulations. We sent out the other day a whole guide to reopening. So as we're getting information in real time, we are sharing it with our members, and we're sharing it on social media as well. Joe, this one is for you. I'm curious if Joe would recommend actually editing an employee handbook to change policies for this current pandemic setting, or making separate policies that can be identified as temporary for this time period.
That's a great question. And I personally would go with the latter. I would do an addendum of policies that you could hand out, going forward. Unless, if you haven't looked at your handbook in years and years and years, it may need a complete overhaul anyway, because a lot of things that you have in your handbook are problematic. But I'm assuming you have a good handbook. I would opt for an addendum that you can hand out, similar to, for example, some of my clients that do a ton of business in the summer, like country clubs and camps and those. I counsel on a handbook that could be handed out to seasonal employees. So I would do with that. I want to just, on that last question on occupational safety and health. I would personally, the OSHA has a website, and you can everybody out there can visit the website for free, and you can read the guidance that OSHA is putting out there and the rules that they're proposing for the workplace, and follow that. So on the issue of rules, I think you're correct. I think the governor is going to dictate a lot of what we do. But from a federal perspective, I think it would be worth your time to jump on the OSHA website and take a look at what they're thinking about and what they're publishing.
Thank you, Joe. Again, this is a question about a mandate. As an employer, are we mandated by law to provide masks and gloves in an office setting? I don't think that's come out yet, but I don't want to answer it.
I don't think New York has mandated that yet, but other states have done something regarding that. Correct, Joe?
Yeah, I'm not aware of a New York law that says you have to provide masks. I expect that's going to be, dictated. It's strongly suggested. It's strongly suggested in the governor's guidelines. I know yesterday, for lawyers, for myself, the New York State Bar Association sent out guidelines recommending masks. So while I don't think there's a legal obligation, I would say this: the governor is saying that you have an obligation to practice good social distancing practices as a condition of staying open. So that would not be something that I necessarily would want to challenge and perhaps have my business be the test baby for not handing out masks. Because I do think it's going to tie into workers' comp claims. I do think it's going to tie into whether you comply with the governor's opening requirements. So while there's no specific law that I'm aware of, I do see it as being something you need to do in order to feel comfortable, sleep at night, that you're not going to wind up with an argument from somebody that you didn't comply with the governor's orders or workplace safety rules.
I'll just follow up on what Joe said. For those business owners that are on the Zoom, I'd highly recommend, if you haven't yet, using this time to gear up on face masks. If you do want to provide them, on hand sanitizer. Everyone's sort of in the same boat, and there is a supply chain, a bit of a supply chain delay.
Yeah.
So, if you put in an order now, it tells you it arrives next week. And we found that next week turns into the week after, and the week after, and you're waiting 3 weeks to get face masks and sanitizer. So I'd be very proactive on that front.
And by the way, we do have members at the Business Council of Westchester who are providing those services that we can refer. So thank you. What advice do you have for Westchester businesses which may be allowed to open as part of the Hudson Valley region prior to New York City that have employees who live in higher risk areas like New York City? So Westchester can open before New York. Our employees are coming from New York City. How do we deal with that?
Well, I would say two things. Number one, and we're looking at this for our own business right now. To Andrew's point, Westchester is easier, I would say, and easier to keep safe. Okay, nothing's 100%. So what we're looking at personally is for a period of time on a temporary basis, accommodating people at other offices. Okay, so we have people that commute into the city. We're looking to accommodate them here in White Plains. We have people from New Jersey that go into the city. We're looking to accommodate them in New Jersey temporarily. But of course, when they go to another location, then we have to look at our density. So there's kind of a domino effect. So we're looking to keep them, quite frankly, out of New York. What we're not looking to do, and what I don't accept, what employers don't have to do, is you don't have to have one set of rules that is inflexibly applied to everyone. So you can have a different set of rules for New York and Westchester. So for example, you can have your Westchester folks coming back to a certain percentage or whatever the governor says, and at the same time allow your New York your New York employees to work remotely. That's lawful. There's no problem with that. And
Okay, great. We have several more questions, so I'm going to kind of go through these. What is the obligation of employers to expedite the safe opening of their business? I understand what Joe is saying about don't open before you're ready, regardless of the government calendar, but is there any timeline any and all employers must adhere to? I think I know the answer, but Joe, I'll let you guys and Chris give that answer.
No, there's no timeline. I mean, you're within your lawful rights. If you want to keep doing this forever, I don't think many people want to, but there's no artificial timeline. I think, in the law, the question is a balance between, how long can your business sustain doing this versus health and safety. And honestly, health and safety is always going to win that seesaw, right? So, but there's no legal law that says you have to let me come. I've had employers call me, and I've had my own people say, you have to let me come back into the workplace to do my job. I've had people say that, and my answer is no, I don't. I don't have to do that. You can work from home. I'm allowing that. I'm paying you. That's okay.
Joe, I think you made the right point in terms of balance.
There?
Yeah, I think Joe made the right point in terms of balance, finding the right balance between these sort of opposite and conflicting opinions about how things should be done. Some people are fearful about even coming out of the house now. We've had this message that stay home saves lives, and how are they going to be required to leave the house now? Are they ready for that? So I think finding the right balance is helpful, making sure that your messaging is correct and appropriate.
Thank you. Andrew, this one's for you. Can you talk about how a company, well, it could be for anyone really, will handle people eating and drinking like coffee and lunch? Will there be protocols for using restrooms? So I'm picturing our beautiful cafeteria at 800.
Yeah, so this is it's a great question and something we're working through right now. For the time being, the cafeterias, the gyms, the conference centers, any area where individuals can congregate will be closed. We're working on protocols for the cafeterias going forward. It's most likely going to look more like a grab and go type operation than any kind of cooking in front of you. Certainly no salad bars, and then being able to implement social distancing when you are going in and out of the cafeterias, and similar. The cafeterias, like the elevators, like the restrooms. The restrooms we are requiring to the best extent we can that there be a maximum of 2 people in the restroom at once, and in the elevators no more than 4 people. And a lot of this comes down to the individuals. People need to respect each other and really do the right thing. So we're putting out guidelines and mandates, and people, employers need to encourage their staff to read them and to implement them, and to abide by them. So in particular, the cafeterias, they will remain closed for the time being. We are working on a reopening plan that will look more of a type of a grab and go. We're also looking into being able to pay with a credit card, not having necessarily a cashier, just to minimize any kind of touch points. So that's all sort of in the works.
Thank you. And what about just the company coffee room? Chris, maybe you can address that.
For us, as an example, we have a pantry with a coffee machine. For the time being, we're encouraging, or for when we do go back, we're encouraging all our staff to bring their own lunch. For myself, as an example, I'm going to bring lunch. I'll bring an ice pack in my lunchbox. I'm not going to be putting anything in the refrigerators. I'll be bringing my own coffee from home. I think people need to do what they feel most comfortable, but to try and minimize congestion and any back and forth, I think, people really should be sort of bringing their own food, eat at your desk, maybe find a socially distant space to eat, and really just be thoughtful about how you're conducting yourself.
And Andrew, I think that's so important for across the board, that the leadership starts at the top, and if the owner, if the head of the company isn't doing the right thing, he or she cannot expect his or her employees to do the right thing. So thank you for that. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would like to, because Andrew mentioned, and I do think a lot of businesses are going to go in this direction. People are going to eat at their desks. I just want to send a word of caution out, okay? That if somebody is eating at their desk and people start asking them work-related questions, that could convert the lunch period to a work time, okay? So that goes back to our policy question. If we're going to eat at our desk, then I would have a communication to the employees and to everybody that the computers are off. This is uninterrupted time. Managers are not to ask individuals questions or to do work, because you don't want to convert that to work time. You got to be very careful about that, because I envision that claim coming. I do.
I just want to add, similar to Joe's point, there's a lot of discussion about reworking of furniture and how do you handle if you're, for example, a technology firm and you have a trading desk with 20 people, 10 on each side across from each other, elbow to elbow, as well as many folks have cubicles. There's some really cost-effective things you can do with plexiglass to create divisions, and this will help with eating at your desk and just creating division. But nothing can replace the the social distancing, keeping 6 feet apart. That's really crucial.
Great. And I do know that we have members that focus on furniture and how to do that. I've invited anyone who wants to post their information in the chat room, and maybe that's the topic of a future webinar that we can do. So thank you. So finally for Joe, this question is specific to the restaurant industry labor law. Given the transition to mostly takeout businesses, can restaurants legally charge customers a service fee versus a gratuity so that we can pay everyone non-tipped minimum wage and then more evenly distribute service fee among the front and the back of the house?
Okay. My answer.
And that will be our final question. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to send them to me at my email at mgordon@thebcw.org, and I will distribute them.
Okay, so my answer to that question is yes, but, okay, that you can do that. However, there are very specific things that you have to do to make sure that that is done lawfully and that you don't wind up with a wage hour challenge. Okay, so there's a lot of this is a very prevalent issue, for example, in like the club industry or in catering businesses, those types of things. There's actually specific language that has to be used and put on the bill. So you can do it, but you need to consult with legal counsel to make sure you have the right verbiage and then keep the right record.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments? I'm just
Can I
taking
add one thing, Marsha?
Absolutely, Marge.
So I just wanted to say, as Joe was speaking about changing your employee handbooks and making sure that you don't have employees working at lunch, there's a lot of new rules that are with FSAs, with COBRA payments, all of those kind of things. And while there's no regulation that you have to notify, there's no official forms you have to notify your employees, I would say err on the safe side and make sure you communicate these changes to your employees so that they're aware they're there. You don't know when somebody's going to say, hey, I would have done this had I known about it. So I would just say there's a lot of changes that have happened with the benefit programs, a lot of things that they've changed. And I strongly suggest that you communicate those changes to your employees so that you don't get stuck with a lawsuit down the road because somebody claims they didn't know about these changes.
Absolutely. I'm looking through the comments in the chat room. What a very informative panel this has been. You've all been such great experts, and we thank everyone that's been on, that's been thoughtful and asked great questions. And I want to thank all of you, Marjorie Ciucci, Senior Employment Benefits at Lawley Insurance, Chris Gately, Director of Human Resources at Meyer Markey and Justick, Joe Saccomano, Attorney at Law at Jackson Lewis, and Andrew Weisz, Executive Vice President at the RPW Group, and especially Tompkins Mahopac Bank for being such a great supporter of these power breakfasts and allowing us to have these great informative webinars. So to everyone, to the panel, and to everyone listening, I wish you good health, be healthy, be safe. Have a great day.
Thanks, Marsha.